Hi, I'm Samuel Prather, Reason user since 2003 and founder of Go Music. Welcome to A Reason to Create. This video that we're doing today is a follow-up to the one that I did before on building an orchestral track from scratch. So if you haven't checked that one out, maybe take a peek. This one will probably make a little bit more sense if you do that. In that video, I mentioned a set of Combinator patches that I personally designed for my own use to make better, more realistic sounding strings, and I'm going to show you today not only how those sound and how they compare against some other ones that I have, but I'm going to show you how I made them and also how best to kind of mix with them so that you get the most realistic sound possible. Even more importantly, if you like the way that mine sound and you want to use those and kind of help me with my beta testing, I'll show you how you can get access to those for free at the end of this video. Because this video is an audio comparison, I definitely want you to listen through some good speakers or at least have some headphones on to get the best idea of the sound quality. And lastly, I'm always trying to make the show better. I've been getting some comments about the background music that aren't favorable, so I've been experimenting with kind of new formats for both the intro of the show and the way that the background music fits in. Let me know what you think down in the comments so that I can make the show as good as possible. With that, let's go ahead and dive in. I love strings in a recording because they add a certain kind of level of class to something. There's a certain level of thickness. I love them as a texture. I think a lot of people do, and that's why even when people use synth, a lot of times they're trying to use them the way that we used to use strings to back up a singer, for example. The big problem with strings is that they're really expensive to record, at least custom ones. Not talking about samples. There's a lot of great sample banks, but those aren't custom made for your song and you can't make any changes in them. To even get a really good string quartet recording, you need to have a pretty nice recording space. You need to make sure that the players are good enough to play the parts for the songs in tune, and also you have to have somebody to write the parts so that they kind of work for that ensemble. And all of it altogether can be a lot to do. The biggest obstacle when trying to create a string patch, especially if you're not a string player, is giving the different sections of an orchestra or even a quartet or quintet the dynamics and kind of separation that it needs in order to feel realistic. When you have a big orchestra, it's tons of individuals who are playing together as a unit, and those individual nuances are what gives it the thickness in terms of the sound. And that's one of the things that's really difficult to replicate if you're not using a real string section. And let me go on record as saying there's nothing like a real one. I think that it's amazing what it adds to the recording. Not all of us have access to an orchestra like that, so what I'm going to do is show you how I decided to get around that problem for when I wanted really nice strings but don't have access to real players to play them. If you haven't checked out that video where I built an orchestral patch from scratch, once again, check that out because that's where I really lay out in super detail what makes a string section sound real. This all came from this song that I tried to make for the 4th of July, where I wanted an orchestral bed behind this patriotic song. And I called my boy Aaron and I said, hey, I can't get these strings to sound as real as I would like. He said, bro, I think you know what you're doing in terms of writing parts, so it's probably just the type of samples that you're using and whether or not you have the articulations and stuff to make them sound real. He also went on to say that I should probably just grab one of these more expensive string packs as a VST, like LA strings, or one of the other ones that might cost, $500, $600, $700, $1,000. There's some good ones that are lower, but everybody kind of rages about these ones that are super expensive. And he said, frankly, I don't think Reason has the stuff in its factory sound banks for you to make that kind of sound that you want. And me being super stubborn and a Reason user since 2003, not to mention not wanting to spend several $100s or north of $1,000 on anybody's string library, I decided to make my own string patches using Reason's factory sound banks to see how close I could get to those other expensive string banks, to see if I could save some money and prove my boy Aaron wrong. What I'm about to play for you is the track that I did for 4th of July, just the vocal and the strings that I used using Reason's factory sound banks in some combinators to kind of make them more expressive. And its strength lies in its promise, not what it's done, but what it will. America, America, you stand tall even now. Your light shines through the valley, even through the cloud. Okay, so that was the track with just the strings and the vocal. Here it is one more time, just the strings. Okay, so that is the string work that I did for that track. You can check that out. There's a link over here. If you haven't heard the full thing, it was my attempt to make a patriotic song that didn't let America off the hook for the stuff that it needs to fix going forward. So definitely check that out. Hope you enjoy it. I think what I was able to do was prove that the strings that are there in Reason can be tweaked and can be put together in a way such that they are in a position to compete with more expensive string banks. So I'm going to show you how I made these and make some just audio comparisons between ones that I have so you can hear the difference. I'm not somebody that arranges strings a lot for a living. I've done a couple jobs where it's been required, but when I talk to people that do it for a living, one thing that I keep hearing is that it's not so much the super expensive sample as much as the way you use it. So I'm going to use Chopin's Opus 28 number 20 just so that we can hear what these different string sounds sound like playing the same thing. This first set is the NN19. So this was there back when I first started using Reason. Obviously samples have gotten better since then, but this is what their stuff sounds like. What I've done is I have split the strings up into sections and panned them accordingly. There's no verb on this right now. This is just raw. This is the whole string bank for the NN19. These are all your choices. They have pizzicato and they have violin, but no individual sections really to speak of, just cello and double bass. Some options in terms of tremolo and pizzicato, but just not really enough to actually cobble together into a cohesive sound. Now let's take a look at what they have in the NNXT. For the NNXT, a newer device in Reason, the NNXT offers a lot of flexibility that the NN19 didn't have. Unfortunately, in terms of the actual sounds that came with it in the factory, there's just not a lot of options. We only have a violin section, cellos, basses, bass section, but it really was not designed to sound real. It was designed more like a keyboard patch, I'm guessing, so that you could just play it as a keyboard and get a stringy sound to come out. a big jump up in quality as far as I can hear. It's not something that sounds good enough that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm ready to replace a real orchestra with it, but we're getting warmer. Notice that the dynamics of the individual instruments written out in 5 parts in pan sounds more realistic than just playing one sound together, even if the samples aren't like 100% where we want them to be. Okay, so the next set of strings you're going to hear from is actually from E Instruments, and it's a rack extension called String Werk. There's certain things about String Werk that are better right away, hands down, which is the different articulations that you have access to and the ease of use to getting them in this one small package. But I still don't like how they sound. I'm sorry, I don't. Maybe it's because I don't understand yet how to use them as well as I could. Also, it's just there's a certain harshness to it. I know some strings are supposed to be studio versus like score strings or something like that, but for my ear, I still don't like them. They're a little bit too harsh. Also, I do want to note that there is a little bit of reverb coming from the String Werk itself, and that's what I'm using, not a factory reverb. You've heard my strings before, but here are my strings playing that same passage. Booyah! I personally like the way that mine sound better out of all the choices that we have, but I think a close runner-up, depending on the situation, might be the String Werk or the NNXT. So also what I wanted to do was just let you hear how those would sound together. This is mine and String Werk together. So in this case, I think that the combination of the two works really well together. I think my strings are adding a warmth and width to it, and the String Werk adds kind of a definition and close miking sound that might be desirable for some situations. The big lesson being here that more string sounds leads to a wider and thicker sound, even if those sounds aren't necessarily the best quality. So remember that an orchestra sounds like it does because there's lots of slightly different voices. And so this starts to replicate that when we use different patches playing the same parts, articulated the same way. If you like the way my strings sound, then let's talk about how I made them and how you could make your own if you wanted to. Let's just take a quick walk through of my combinator that I made and its functionality. So what I did was I went to the Orchestral sound bank, which has strings that are laid out very badly in my opinion, but the samples are amazing. So you have tremolo, staccato, you have long notes. You also have harmonics that give you that real room reverb sound that strings make when they're in a room, which I think is like one of the most important things to making strings sound real. By themselves, these kind of individual collections of sounds are just that, individual collections of sounds. But when you start combining them, then you get magic to happen. So what I did was I took those orchestra sounds, I put a solo violin in the first channel so that you could control the definition, right? Get that close sound under control. I also used that natural harmonic right here as my reverb. I ran that to the second channel reverb so you could control that, the volume of your reverb right there on the front without having to dig too far into the programming side. Also, I have violins loud and long and then violins soft and long. So the combination of the two allows you to have a slightly different character to your orchestra. If you want it to be more bright and in your face, you can just use kind of the loud part of it. And if you want it to be softer and more subdued, you can use the softer part. These are programmable, so you can make it do whatever you want, really. All these are mutable. And my favorite part about these is that I ran that master fader to the mod wheel, so you can control the whole volume of, for example, the whole violin section simultaneously and give it that kind of expressive swell or diminuendo that makes it sound like a real section. And that's one of the magic things about a combinator in general, is it allows you to combine all these different sounds and then allows you through the programmer to automate things and send controls to different knobs that you wouldn't normally be able to do. If I were starting from scratch, I'd just add a combinator here. I'd throw in a mixer, and I'd throw in 4 NNXTs. And then I'd go through the orchestra sound bank, pull up my strings, I'd take maybe a solo violin patch, take the harmonics, go long loud for violins, and then I'd go long soft. And then I would set up rotary 1 as my source, and the target would be my master level. Mod wheel controls my master level. I'd set rotary 1 to control the level of channel 1, rotary 2 to set the level of channel 2, rotary 3. All right, so now I can control individually all the 4 inputs here. With my rotaries, I'd name these, and then I'd make these all mute buttons by going to here, saying button 1 is going to channel 1 mute, channel 2 mute, channel 3 mute, and channel 4 mute. Okay? I'd name all these mute, and also name these appropriately. And then to finish up, you can select a backdrop if you learned how to make one. So you'd select there's a template that you can download. There's a YouTube video that shows how to use it. You can make your own custom backgrounds for your combinator. You open that and voila. You've got yourself one of the instruments from this set that I'm talking about. Like I was saying, it's going to sound thicker than any of these by themselves and still give you a lot of control in terms of definition and expression because it lets you have volume. What it does not do is give you access to different articulations. So basically, you would have to create one of these for every instrument in every articulation in order to be able to have tremolo, to have short attack on things, etc. The good news for you is that I've done all this already. So if you take a look here, you'll see that I have made long, short, and tremolo for all of the sections in the orchestra. So violin, violin 2, viola, cello, and bass. Now, to be fair, the orchestra doesn't have a separate set of samples for violin 2 and violin. It's just the same violins, but just labeled so that you can use them and mix easily. Now, if you watched my last video where I talked about orchestral programming, one of the big things that's really important is the way that these things are panned if you want them to sound real. If they're all coming from the same place, it's not going to sound as realistic as when they're spread apart. You'll notice that I have a bus where all of my strings are going, which is panned center, but all the individual instruments, violin is panned left, where you're going to see them on the stage. Second violins are going to be a little less left, but still to the left. Violas are going to be closer to the middle, cellos, and then basses. So this is the way that we're used to hearing strings when we hear them live. So we want to make sure that we're presenting them that way when we're trying to make someone believe that this is a real string section. In order for this to work optimally, unfortunately, we have to make a separate channel for each articulation, bus that to the whole string bus, and then pan everything the appropriate way. So just to show you what I mean, if I want the violins, I need to send all my violins to violin 1, put that at roughly 60, take all these, send them to a new output bus, all right, my second violins are going to sit not quite as far Unfortunately, as you can see, I don't have the option to just bulk grab and drop these, because I would if I could. See what happens if I try to. If I hit shift, it won't even let me select all of them. If I am able to select all of them, which is kind of one of those programming glitchy things that sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. Even when I can't drag it to the timeline like I would like to. So it's one at a time. That's the only way to do this. Reason, fix that, please. You know, that'd be nice. All right. If I put that in a new output bus, we're going to call this bus violas. And the violas are going to be pretty much in the center. Now I just need to do the same thing with my cellos. And last but not least, we have our bass section. So our basses, and the basses are going to go over to the left side. We have all these separated into separate buses that go to their section. So all the articulations now go to the proper section. We still want to send all of these to their own master output bus, which we're going to call strings. And I'm going to send all of those section buses to that string bus. What we end up having is 5 groups of 3 articulations going to individual buses that are panned separately, and all of those buses are summed together in one bus, which is our string channel, which we can apply whatever reverb that we feel is necessary, even though you probably won't need more than what is already present here in the tracks by default. What that means is you can take your exploded part, and if it's a part that has tremolo, you just move it to the tremolo line. If it's a part that's shorter, you move it to the short line, and voila. Everything goes to the bus where it's supposed to and works cohesively as one unit.
Yay!
I've showed you my process. Now you can take a bunch of NNXTs, put them in a combinator, program them so that they can use those orchestra sounds already present in Reason's default sound banks and make a beautiful, realistic sounding orchestra. You can also run 15 tracks into 5 separate buses and sub those into one bus to get a nice cohesive string sound that's panned properly. But if you like the way mine sounded and you don't want to waste your time doing it again, then you can go to my website at www.samuelprather.com. If you subscribe and send me an email just asking about it, I will be happy to add you to my beta testing team. I want to eventually make these an official refill through Reason, but for right now, for the people that are watching, I want to make it available to you for free. So just go over to my website, shoot me an email saying that you're interested. And you know, I don't get paid to do this. My channel is not even high enough in terms of the view hours to be monetized. So if you do like them and these save you a couple $100 from having to buy a more expensive string library, then you know, there's a donation link right down in the description. If you are able to, you know, I know these are tough times for a lot of people. If you're able to though, go ahead and help me make these videos. My channel offers a ton of different content. We have tutorials like on this little mini series, A Reason to Create. There's also Go Music School, which is just music theory tutorials for those of you that need a brush up. I also have my official music videos. I have some live shows that I've done with my band, as well as kind of curated radio stations that you can check out. So if you're not able to make a donation today, then help me by getting this channel monetized by watching some of those videos. Hopefully you'll enjoy those as well. Do you think that what I covered today will be of use to you? If so, hit that like and then hit the subscribe button. We just hit 3,000 subscribers. Also make sure to hit that bell so you can know when I come out with new content. I'm Samuel Prather. Thank you for watching today. I hope I gave you a reason to create.